Hello everyone. Once again welcome all of you to this course MOOC course of International Economics. So in the previous lecture we have discussed about the basic concept, basic issues related with international economics. Now when we are dealing with international economics, the entire concept of international economics depends upon cost differences, and we feel or there is a need to study the concept of international economics separately. So here we have to study about some theories of international economics. So one such theories of international economics is the theory of comparative advantage. So today we're going to study about the theory of comparative advantage, and this is the theory of comparative advantage is given by David Ricardo. So Professor David Ricardo, comparative cost advantage theory of international trade. So how this theory originate? So the original description of the idea can be found in an essay on the external corn trade by Robert Torrens in 1815. David Ricardo formalized the idea using a compelling yet simple numerical example in his 1817 book titled On the Principles of Political Economy and Taxation. The idea appeared again in James Mill's Element of Political Economy in 1821. And finally, the concept became a key features of international political economy upon the publications of Principles of Political Economy by John Stuart Mill in 1848. Comparative cost advantage theory. If we continue the origin, the economist David Ricardo in his book Principles of Political Economy and Taxation systematically represented the theory of comparative cost and advantage theory. According to comparative cost advantage theory of international trade, each country exports the commodity in which it has cost advantage and will import the commodity in which it has cost disadvantage, and this cost disadvantage is less. So if we continue in this slide, so a country will export a commodity where a country is having more comparative cost advantage, and a country will import those commodities where it will have less comparative cost disadvantage. So comparative advantage theory of Ricardo. So Ricardo's law of comparative advantage improved upon the earlier law of absolute advantage. So how? So before Ricardo, there was Adam Smith, the classical economist. Adam Smith talked about the absolute advantage. Okay, so according to Adam Smith, if A advanced land is more productive than B backward land in every productive activity, would both countries benefit from trade? The law of absolute advantage has no answer to this question. Ricardo's law of comparative advantage shows that the answer is yes. Okay, so if we consider the absolute advantage theory of Adam Smith, so Adam Smith talk about a country will be gain in those commodity where it has an absolutely advantage in producing that commodity. But if in a country a advanced land is more productive than another land, okay, so whether the both countries can benefit. So Ricardo have given this answer that okay, both the countries can be benefited. The principle of comparative cost is based on the difference in production cost of similar commodities in different countries. Production costs differ in countries because of geographical division of labor and specialization in production. Each country specializes in the production of that commodity in which its comparative cost of production is the least. Therefore, when a country enters into trade with some other country, it will export those commodities in which it has comparative production cost are less and will import those commodities in which its comparative production costs are high. This is the basis of international trade according to Ricardo, and we know it as a cost difference. So if we go further, what is cost difference? The theory of comparative cost is explained by taking these three types of differences in cost: absolute, equal, and comparative. Absolute difference in cost. So what is absolute difference in cost? There may be absolute difference in cost when one country produces a commodity at an absolute lower cost of production than the other. What is equal differences in cost? Equal differences in cost arise when two commodities are produced in both countries at the same cost difference. When cost difference are equal, no country stands to gain from trade, hence international trade is not possible. And what is comparative difference in cost? Comparative difference in cost occur when one country has an absolute advantage in the production of both the commodities, but a comparative advantage in production of one commodity than in the other commodity. So what is comparative advantage? If one nation is less efficient in the production of a good than another nation, there is still a basis of gains from trade. A nation should specialize in production and export the good for which its relative or comparative advantage is greatest. A nation should specialize in production and export the good for which it has the least relative disadvantage. A nation should import the good for which its relative comparative advantage is the least. A nation should import the good for which it has the greatest relative disadvantage. So the cost of comparative advantage is also known as the law of comparative advantage, LCA. So according to LCA, or the law of comparative advantage, even if one nation has an absolute disadvantage with respect to the other nation in the production of both commodities, there is still a basis for mutually beneficial trade. This nation should specialize in the production and export of the commodity in which its absolute disadvantage is smaller, that is, the commodity of its comparative advantage, and import the commodity in which its absolute disadvantage is greater. This is the commodity of its comparative disadvantage. So let us take some practical examples from our relative field. Say example 1, let us take some oil producing countries. Oil producing nations have a comparative advantage in chemicals. Their locally produced oil provides a cheap source of material for the chemicals when compared to countries without it. A lot of the raw ingredients are produced in the oil distillery process. As a result, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Mexico are competitive with US chemical production firm. Their chemicals are inexpensive, making their opportunity cost low. So if we take the example of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Mexico, in case of oil producing, so it has a comparative advantage over other developed countries like USA and all those things. Let us take another example from our own country, India. Another example is India's call center. We know that India has become a global hub of BPO or call centers. US companies buy this service because it is cheaper than locating the call centers in America. Indian call centers are not better than US call centers. Their workers do not always speak English very clearly, but they provide the service cheaply enough to make the trade-off worth it. So in this second example regarding competitive cost, if we take the example of a call center, say company X call center is situated in India, anywhere in India, say in Bangalore, Delhi. So what we say, in India, the labor is cheap. Population is quite high in India. So the labor, we are availing cheap labor. The wages that are paying to the labor are very cheap. So in this case, the US company, any US company, XYZ, they are employing or they are opening their call centers in India only because of this cheap wage they have to pay. And finally, this service cheaply enough, this make a trade-off worth it. So this is the relevant example from India. Why these call centers have a comparative advantage establishing in India than in US. Now, when we are going to explain the theory of comparative cost advantage theory, this theory is based upon some assumptions. So let us take the assumptions. There are only two countries, say A and B. They produce the same two commodities, X and Y. Tastes are similar in both countries. Labor is the only factor of production. Prices of the two commodities are determined by labor cost, that is the number of labor units employed to produce each. Commodities are produced under the law of constant cost. Trade between the two countries takes place on the basis of the barter system. There is free trade between the two countries, there being no trade barriers or restrictions in the movement of commodities. No transport costs are involved in carrying trade between the two countries. The international market is perfect so that the exchange ratio of the two commodities is the same. So if we discuss all these assumptions, so basically the Ricardian model is to explain his theory of comparative cost advantage theory. It is a 2x2 model. 2x2 model means two country, two commodity, but Ricardo used only one factor, that is labor. So among those assumptions, let us take these three assumptions into account while explaining the theory. So we are sorting out these three assumptions. There are two countries. So instead of A and B country, we are say country A is China. Country A is USA and country B is China. Say there are two goods, car and wine. And we also considered another assumption that there is no transport cost. So before specialization and trade, output produced per unit of resources. So here we are having country A and country B. So and two commodities are our car and wine. So country A, in case of car it is 20, in case of wine it is 12. In country B, in case of car it is 5, and in case of wine it is 10. So car, now from the table what we see, which country can produce more car with the same amount of resources. So from the table it is observed that country A can produce more car with the same amount of resources. And from the table what we again also see, which country can produce more wine with the same amount of resources. It is the same country, country A. So if we see the table again, so what we observe that country A can produce more car and more wine with the same amount of resources than the country B. Now, since the country A is more productive in the production of both the goods, it is said to be possess an absolute advantage in the production of both the commodities. Okay, so here from the table it is clearly seen that country A can produce 20 car, 12 unit of wine, but country B the ratio is 5 and 10. So country A has an absolute advantage in production of car and in production of wine. Now suppose each country has 2 unit of resources. What are the production combination of the two countries before trade? So it is 20 and 12, 5 and 10. We already got it. So production combination is the car combination is 25 and the combination of wine is 22. Production combination before trade. Okay. Including country A and including country B. So car tends to 25 and wine tends to 22, combining the production before trade of both the countries. Now opportunity cost of production. So in case of country A and in case of country B, okay, so in case of country A, what is the cost of 1 unit of car in terms of wine foregone? It is 0.6 wine. And what is the cost of 1 case of wine in terms of car? It is 1.67 car. Similarly, in case of country B, what is the cost of 1 unit of car in terms of wine foregone? It is 2 wine. And what is the cost of 1 case of wine in terms of car? It is 0.5 car. That is, country has a lower opportunity cost of producing car than country B. And country B has a lower opportunity cost of producing wine than China. So here in this slide, we have used the word opportunity cost. So what is opportunity cost? So opportunity cost, it refers to what we or you sacrifice in making an economic choice. So this means in this table, if we want to produce more car, then how much of wine we have to sacrifice? It is 0.6. And for country A, if the country A wish to produce more wine, then what is the opportunity cost of foregoing a car? It is 1.67. Okay, so from the table, if we consider the concept of opportunity cost, so we see that country A has lower opportunity cost in producing car and country B has a lower opportunity cost in producing wine. So this is the concept of opportunity cost. And similarly, as we talk about that, competitive cost advantage also depends upon specialization and division of labor. So what is specialization? In international trade, specialization refers to a country's decision to measure in the production of a certain goods or list of goods because of the advantages it possesses in their production. Now, what is competitive advantage? So, again, we have two countries, country A, country B. So, we are considering the cost of 1 unit of car in terms of wine and cost of 1 case of wine in terms of car. So, in country A, what we got? We got 0.6 wine, and for country A, in case of wine, we got 1.67 car. For country B, cost of 1 unit of car is 2 wine, and cost of 1 case of wine is 0.5 car. So it means that a country can produce a good at a lower opportunity cost than another country. So what is competitive advantage? So country A has a competitive advantage in producing cars and country B has a competitive advantage in production of wine. So output after specialization. Suppose country A specializes in producing car and country B specializes in producing wine. So what is the output combination after specialization? So output combination after specialization, it becomes, for car it is 30, for wine it becomes 26. So for car, combining country A and country B, it is 30. And for wine, combining country A and country B, it becomes 26. So the principle of competitive advantage, we are considering two cases. One is before specialization, another is after specialization. So if we compare these two tables, before specialization table and after specialization table, so what we see that after specialization, the output of both cars and wines are higher. So the principle of competitive advantage, it says that when countries specializes according to their competitive advantage, lower opportunity cost, their combined output will be maximized. The gains from trade. So when there is competitive advantage, definitely a country will have or will take advantage to gain some trade or from their trade. So suppose the terms of trade is 1 unit of car is to 1 unit of wine. The volume of trade is 9 units of car and 9 cases of wine. What is the consumption combination after trade? So in case of country A, the car it becomes 30 minus 9, and in case of wine it becomes 6 plus 9. For country B it becomes 0 plus 9. And for wine, it becomes 20 minus 9. So the combination of the consumption combination after trade for car, combining both country A and country B, it becomes 30. And for wine, combining both country A and country B, it becomes 26. So the gains from trade, we can find the gains from trade. Suppose the terms of trade is 1 car is to 1 wine. Alternatively, gains from trade is for country A, 0.6 wine, cost of 1 unit of car, and 1.67 car in the cost of 1 unit of wine. For country B, it is 2 wine for the cost of 1 unit of car, and for the country B, it is 0.5 car for the cost of 1 unit of wine. Country A is 1 unit of car exported gain equal to 1 minus 0.6 wine equal 0.4 wine, and country B is 1 unit of wine exported gain equal 1 minus 0.5 car equal 0.5 car. Now besides this, what are the other gains that the country can avail from their trade? So international transfer of technology. So both the countries, country A and B, can have their technology, can transfer technology, technological know-how, technological knowledge can come from one country to another country. Then increasing competition in the domestic market. So when competition increases in the domestic market, the quality of the product, it will increase, efficiency will increase, and finally other gains from trade because of this competitive advantage is raising the standard of living. The people's standard of living, the per capita income will definitely goes up because of the competitive cost advantages. Cost of conducting trade. So what are the costs that will impact because of this competitive cost advantage? Transportation cost will reduce the gains from trade, and political disturbances or war. If there is some political instability or war, or your law and order situation are not stable, then it will raises the risks and hence reduces the gains from trade. So there are possibilities of these two things also in case of cost of conducting trade. So the comparative cost advantage theory can also be explained diagrammatically. So in a diagram we have considered in the y-axis we are measuring commodity Y, in the x-axis we are measuring commodity X. So let PQ be the production possibility curve of country A and RS of country B. So PQ is the production possibility curve of country A, and RS it is the production possibility curve of country B. The curve PQ, that is the production possibility curve PQ of country A, shows that country A has an absolute advantage in the production of both the commodities X and Y respectively over country B. So from the PPC curve, both the PPC curve, PQ and RS, what we see or what we observe, that country A is having absolute advantage. That is, country A can produce both the commodities X and the commodity Y at an absolute advantage, and country B, the curve PPC curve shows that the commodities can be produced less compared to country A. This is due to the fact that the production possibility curve RS of country A lies below country A, or we can say that this is due to the fact that the production possibility curve RS of country B lies below the production possibility curve PQ of country A. Country B produces QR unit of commodity Y and OS unit of commodity X. If we continue this diagram further, we can explain to show the competitive advantage position in trade. A line RT, the dotted line RT, you can see in the diagram, is drawn parallel to line PQ. Now country A has a competitive advantage in the production of commodity X only because it exports OT, which is greater than OS units relative to country B. On the other hand, country B has least competitive disadvantage in production of commodity Y only. This is because if it gives up resources required to produce OS unit of X, it would be able to produce commodity Y by an amount less than OR. The country A has a competitive advantage in the production of commodity X, and country B has least competitive disadvantage in production of commodity Y. So from the diagram we can see or we can observe that country B already has competitive disadvantage. After international trade has taken up, the disadvantage has become lower. Okay, it has become least competitive disadvantage. So this is how the diagram explains. Now the competitive cost advantage theory has also been criticized. So the principle of competitive advantage has been very basis of international trade for over a century until after the First World War. Since then, critics have been able only to modify and amplify it. As rightly pointed out by Professor Samuelson, if theories like girls could win beauty contest, comparative advantage could certainly rate high in that it is an elegantly logical structure. But the theory is not free from some defect. In particular, it has been criticized by Burton Ohlin and Frank D. Graham. We discuss some of the important criticism as under. So, these are the following grounds where the Ricardian theory of comparative cost advantage has been criticized. The first one is unrealistic assumptions of labor cost. So, in Ricardo have considered the assumption labor cost, and Ricardo have taken into consideration only the factor labor. But what we observe that in production process we cannot stick to one factor, that is labor. So the first very assumptions that there is only one factor or single factor labor, it seems to be unrealistic. So second criticism is no similar taste. So what we see that taste and preferences, it differs from place to place, time to time. So the assumptions that it has taken, that the taste will remain same throughout the process, it is something not valid. So we cannot find similar taste anywhere. Then static assumption of fixed properties. So while describing this theory of comparative advantage, so one assumption is that fixed proportion, static assumption, there are fixed proportion, but this assumption of fixed proportion seems to be static, because proportions, it is a dynamic process, it will change. So how it will become a static? It is not possible. Then regarding constant cost, there is also criticism regarding constant cost, and the assumption of constant cost is unrealistic, because cost cannot be constant. Cost is such a thing, cost is such a matter that it will changes over period of time, it will change over time, it is a dynamic concept. So we cannot have keep cost constant. One another criticism is that it ignores the transport cost, or while giving this theory, Ricardo says that there is no transport cost. Now the transport cost, it have an impact, it have a high impact in the cost of production. If the transport cost is more, definitely the price of a good is going to be more. If the transport cost is very negligible or low, then somehow it may the price of the goods, it may be low. So we cannot ignore the transport cost. Transport cost, it has an assumption, it has a very much impact upon the cost of production of a commodity. Ricardo also assumes that factors are not fully mobile. Okay, but factors do mobile. There is mobility of factors. Labor can move from one place to another. Capital can move from one places to another through banks or other financial institutions. So mobility of the factors is very much important. And Ricardo talked that mobility factors are not fully mobile. Two country, two commodity model is unrealistic. Okay, so trade now takes place between multi-country. There may be multi-commodity, but trade is not concise to only two country and two commodity. We cannot take trade in today's modern world into two country and two commodity. Then Ricardo also talk about free trade. So free trade is not always acceptable. Is the concept of free trade is somehow unrealistic, because every government, every nation have some protection policy to protect their domestic industries. So if free trade are allowed, what will happen? What will be the causes? So there will be tough competition, there will be high competition, and the domestic industry will suffer. Then Ricardo also considered the assumption of full employment. So most cases, what we often see, that there are underemployment, unemployment. So the concept of full employment is not seen, and self-interest hinders its operation. So Ricardo talk about that all that trade goes on because of the self-interest and its operations. So according to Ricardo, this self-interest is an hindrance in the operation of the competitive cost advantage theory. So if we come to the conclusion, or if we can conclude, when a large number of goods is produced by two countries, operation of competitive advantage requires that the goods be ranked by degree of competitive cost. Each country exports the product in which it has the greatest competitive advantage. Conversely, each country imports the product in which it has greatest competitive disadvantage. So, when a large number of goods is produced by two countries or any nation, if we considered in today's perspective, if a nation is producing more commodities, more goods, okay, so the entire thing depends upon its competitive advantage. Okay, the cost difference, it depends upon the cost difference of those countries. So a country or a nation will export only those commodities where they will get more competitive advantage, and definitely a country will import. Country have to import. When we are talking about international trade, there is import and export, but a country will import only those commodities where there is competitive or less competitive disadvantage. So this is because of the cost differences. So say for example, India is producing tea, and India can export tea to other nations, to other developed nations, say UK, US, other developed nations. Now, say for example, US is a capital rich country, isn't it? But still US is importing tea from India. US can produce their own tea, isn't it? But what we see, what we observe, that if US is going to produce tea by them, okay, or UK is going to produce tea by them, then what will happen? The cost will be more. Okay, there will be a cost difference. Now, if instead of producing the tea, if the US or if UK is importing tea from India, then it will cost them least cost. Okay, so what is the benefit? India is also benefit in exporting the tea, and US is also benefit in importing the tea. Say say for example, India can export tea, say at rupees 75 per kg, say, and if US is going to produce tea, say it will take rupees 90. But if US is importing from India, say it may import at rupees 75 only. So India is producing at rupees 50, US is importing at 75 rather than rupees 90. So there is a cost difference of rupees 25, where both the countries India and US are simultaneously benefited. So this is the concept of cost difference, and the entire competitive cost advantage theory, it depends upon this competitive cost advantage theory. So despite this weakness, the theory has stood the test of times. Its basic structure has remained intact, even though many refinements have been made over it. To conclude with Professor Samuelson, yet for all its oversimplification, the theory of competitive advantage has in it a most important glimpse of truth. Political economy has found few more pregnant principles. A nation that neglects competitive advantage may have to pay a heavy price in terms of living standards at potential rates of growth. So finally, the theory have been criticized in various ways, but still in present context, it has stood as a basis for all other theories. In this case, what Professor Samuelson has said, it is very much important. So what he says that a nations that neglect competitive advantage may have to pay a heavy price. So if some countries are neglecting competitive advantage, if they don't want to go through this competitive cost advantage theory, they have to pay a heavy price in terms of the living standard and potential rate of growth. So that will impact if someone is neglecting this competitive cost, or if someone is not trading with other countries, they are not taking these cost differences into considerations. So the impact may be on the rising or heavy price on their goods, and their impact may be also on the standard of living, or low standard of living, and the rate of growth may also hamper. So this is how we can conclude the competitive advantage theory. Thank you.